はい。おはよう。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for taking time to participate in the Robot Revolution and Industrial IoT International Symposium 2024, despite your very busy schedule. My name is Nakatomi, and I represent the Robot Revolution and Industrial IoT Initiative. Today, I have the honor of delivering the opening remarks for this international symposium, which is co-hosted by the RRI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan, and Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Protection of Germany. As you can see on the screen, this event is also being sponsored by a number of supporting companies. On this occasion, I would like to express our heartfelt appreciation for their support as well. This symposium first took place in 2015, and this marks the 10th iteration. Global leaders and experts have come together to explore advanced cases related to industrial IoT and to discuss the future challenges and solutions facing our industries. The theme for this 10th symposium is Call for Action, Manufacturing Transformation for Social Innovation. In the following sessions, we'll have sub-themes. The first session will be titled Enabler of Manufacturing Transformation Data Space, which will introduce how digital ecosystems are being formed in the manufacturing sector and outline the expectations participants have for the engagement. In the afternoon, Session 2 will focus on industrial sustainability, representing trends from Europe and United States on common challenges such as improving labor productivity and addressing the climate crisis. We will also examine the challenges each country faces regarding digital initiatives such as DX and AI applications, and discuss issues that require international collaboration. Session 3 will provide a progress report on the collaboration between Germany's Plattform Industrie 4.0 and the RRI. Japanese and German experts will share updates on discussions surrounding international standardization, industrial security, business ecosystems, and since last year, industrial data collaboration. Following the 3 sessions, we will also be having a networking opportunity starting at 6:30 p.m. at the restaurant Hikage on the second floor of this very building. Light meals and drinks will be provided, so please do join us. Now, I would like to officially declare the opening of this international symposium. To begin, I would like to introduce Mr. Nakajima from RRI, who will facilitate Session 1 and moderate the panel discussion. Nakajima-san is responsible for Working Group 1, the Manufacturing Business Transformation Working Group through IoT at the RRI Secretariat. Thank you, Nakajima-san, for your time.
Nakatomi-sama,
Thank you, Mr. Nakatomi. So we would like to begin. But before entering the first session, there is one request that I'd like to share. We are going to have pretty lengthy panel discussion to make sure we have good interaction. When you ask questions to speakers and panelists, since there are many audience participating online, please use the YouTube description. You would find the link there from which you can jump onto the site where you can ask questions. That is the Slido application. We'll be able to accept your questions in Slido. So your questions, please identify your name and your affiliation. Before writing your questions, we'll be looking through your questions and try to incorporate your questions into our panel discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the very first speaker. We have Mr. Markus Hess, Deputy Director General of Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Actions. The title is Necessity of Industrial Data Sharing for Future Growth. So Mr. Hess, please take the floor.
Dear Nakatomi-san, ladies and gentlemen, minasama. My name is Markus Hess. I'm the Deputy Director General of the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action of Germany, and I'm deeply honored to attend today's meeting. I want to thank the RRI for the kind invitation for this event. This year, we're celebrating 12 years of Industrie 4.0. In this time frame, Japan, especially the RRI, was always a trusted, reliable, and respected partner. RRI itself was founded 10 years ago, and I've been on this journey for 8 years, so we all together have a long way behind us and a long way in front of us. This should illustrate the long way. Here we are. As you can see, we've started 2011, but the main action since 2015 and ongoing. The concepts created within the global Industrie 4.0 framework are remarkable if you look at the milestones on the timeline. The platform Industrie 4.0, together with its international cooperation partners, was able to set up or to support multiple successful initiatives with an outstanding footprint on a global scale. Just to name a few: the Asset Administration Shell, Industrial Digital Twin Association, OPC UA, Labs Network Industry, Standardization Council Industrie 4.0, and if you look at the timeline, after 2019, the X is there. It's Gaia X, it's Catena X, it's Manufacturing X, and now, today, it's Factory X, and many other initiatives and projects. I like to thank Japan, government and industries, and the RRI for their valuable contributions. Without you, we would not be where we are today. This is true on the bilateral basis, but it's also true on a multilateral basis. Together, we share the view that Industrie 4.0 is a global concept, as industry value chains are global. International collaboration, supported by a strong community of contributors from businesses, governments, and academia, is the basis for the success. Just together and only together, we can succeed. Today, we can build on the trustful exchange of concepts and ideas around the globe. One concept is that Industrie 4.0 or smart manufacturing is fully data-driven. Today, but even more in the future, no data, no data treatment, no business. The underlying concept of industrial data ecosystems highlights the tremendous potential of trustful and federated utilization of data. These ecosystems will strengthen the resilience and sustainability of global supply chains. And even more, it is key to set the future competitiveness of our industries in all sectors. Data only has value if we are able to enable it across sectors. Its value can increase exponentially if you use data together with business partners. To be successful, we need, to our conviction, three things. First, a common global systemic approach. Second, a broad adoption of industrial data ecosystems and the expansion of digital infrastructure. And third, openness, transparency, and the use of open source are essential. The German government will continuously support the development of sovereign industrial data ecosystems. To achieve this, we need to set a common regulatory framework and standards, a technical base layer where shared services can be easily used. Every industry sector should be integrated step by step. But these must also be international compatible and globally operational. Here comes International Manufacturing X into play. We introduced Manufacturing X as a truly international initiative from scratch. It will develop and implement scalable concepts, how to utilize data along the value chain, while users keep control over their data. Your data, your decision. Trust and benefit for all participants are essential for its success. We think it's important, connection of data of different manufacturing value chains across industries and countries, enabling innovative solutions across the value chains in an interoperable and sovereign way, and the connection of country-specific interoperability frameworks and setup of common standards. Dear ladies and gentlemen, today's symposium is the perfect ground to understand the new concepts developed in the last year and the achievements made. I would like to encourage the companies and experts to take advantage of the opportunities for cooperation to ensure the global interoperability of various solutions and technologies. I wish you, from the deepest of my heart, a fruitful and successful symposium. Thank you for your attention. Arigato.
様ありがとうございました。次の講演者はですね、マニファクチャリング X のメンバーでもあり、ピア 4.0 の
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next lecture. We have Mr. Tomas Hahn, a member of Manufacturing S and a fellow at Siemens AG. The title of his lecture is Making Manufacturing X International. Mr. Hahn, please begin your lecture.
It's a real pleasure after the opening from my side to start with the first presentation about international manufacturing or Make Manufacturing X International. Like Markus has explained a little bit the journey which we have taken and you have seen also the different milestones where 80–90% we are doing together with Japan when you were just calculating the years about the cooperation and since we are existing. Also my name is Tomas Hahn. I'm a fellow, Siemens fellow at Siemens as a company, taking nearly just from the beginning in my job outside of Siemens, taking care for Plattform Industrie 4.0 Manufacturing X initiative, and inside, as you can imagine, also for the technology aspects which we are doing in the company, with the aspects like Markus has mentioned regarding competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability. But let's start coming from industry. Let's start with two examples to make it a little bit more touchable, and then I will dig in a little bit about the concepts, what we are doing together, what are the tasks we want to achieve together, and how we set this all up. And I have also to say a special thanks to Nakashima-san, because we are working super closely in this environment together to get it done together. But let's start with two examples or three examples. Well known, I think everybody in the room is aware of this example, but it's shown quite well why data ecosystems, data, the use of data, and to get value out of the data to improve something or to do or to start something is from high relevance, and in this case also for industry. And I give you two examples here at the first slide. One is when you're thinking about CO2 emission reporting and optimizing, because at the end we have to look how we reduce this. And when you're looking, we have several representatives from industry. When you're looking at your own shop floor, you are seeing maybe, depending what you are producing, 10 to 20% of the CO2 emission. And you can imagine the 90 or 80% is in the upstream and downstream. And when you really want to have an overview about your emission respective, when you really want to have an optimization for the emission to reduce the CO2 emission, then you have to look at the complete chain or value chain or supply chain, however, what is needed, depending what you're doing. Also meaning we have to look to the left and to the right and to get data transparency around. Second example is regarding battery. When you're looking at a battery and the one of the other regions are highly depending on rare material. But the good thing also on batteries are you can recycle a lot. You see here a number 96, 95%, also high. And you can imagine this is also improving then our dependency or reducing our dependencies because we can recycle a lot. But also this is only possible when you have, let's say, and Markus has mentioned also the digital twin, when you have the complete overview, when you have the passport, how the battery is produced, used, and then you can optimize, the recycling to put it into a circular economy. And only to get this a little bit more touchable, only to see a little bit, you see here, it's an example from Catena X, in X projects in the automotive area. And for sure, battery optimization on the use to optimize the use of the batteries, but also to collect step by step the different information exactly to have this potential to recycle or to better use the battery. You see here an example from a battery passport. You see it how it's going along the complete chain from the mining up to the recycling. I will not touch in the detail. And on the other side, you see some kind of categories where you collect the data depending what you want to do. And you see here also how additional information are increasingly collected, stored decentral, especially in the example of a battery, this is sometimes, or very often is in a car built and is somewhere, but it's really collected consequently about the different steps, and you get here the information from the partners very quick. This is only to give you one touchable example why this is so important to have this data transparency. This was 2 use cases. I am very sure in this room we will collect hundreds of use cases in doing this, but really is only some kind of, to setting a little bit the scene, what is driving us. Other example is, security topics. This is one of the use cases which we are touching in the Factory X project. Catena X was automotive. Factory X is exactly going down to the machine tool building industry, going down to the shop floor, where we have some kind of concrete use cases, where you have on the one side the horizontal, and on the second side the connectivity down to the, or vertical down to the shop floor. And to collect the data and to have on your system, and the one or others knowing this, to fulfill some kind of, in Europe called Cyber Resilience Act, so that you can say what status of the software is on your device. Is this actual security software installed or not? So we are obliged, we want and are obliged to doing this. This is one of the use cases which we are targeting in factories. It's only to give you 2-3 examples why this is important, why data transparency is important, how we are doing this, and how we are doing this together, which I will touch on some slides later. Going back a little bit about the general needs we have. We have here, and I touched this before with the battery, we have some kind of deployment, depending what is needed, can be close to the production line, can be close to the cloud. It's depending what you want to achieve with your use case or with your business case. Data sharing, I think I mentioned above before, how this is done in the 3 use cases and why this is needed. And, you know, to get it done, you have to look regarding interoperability. So this is somehow the right column, the right topic. But, and this is for me one of the most important sentences on the slide, nobody can do this alone. So we have to look together how we are doing this in a global way, how we are doing this and drive interoperability, respecting local needs and local environments, local infrastructure, and also needs from different verticals, but looking how we can achieve a certain level of interoperability, which we can do together. And I have to say, we have yesterday evening during the dinner a short discussion about Japanese and German attitude to address topics and engineering tasks. We are in this case quite similar. I will exclude, and this is a German talk, about the train system in Germany. I apologize for this, but when you're looking to the engineering stuff, you know, we are quite on a, have a similar attitude in doing this. And that's the reason why we have here over years a very good cooperation and impactful and with a lot of results. That's what we have to do and how we are doing this. And you see here we have different manufacturing domains. You see here around the circle. You see the car, which was the example for Catena X. You see a robot system on the left side. It's more a symbol for Factory X. You have the chemical elements on the left side, where we are speaking about material passport and chemical processes. You have energy, you have food and beverage, and aerospace, and also we have a huge bunch of verticals, which we are, and that's an important topic in the middle, doing together in the International Manufacturing X, addressing this together, looking what are interoperability needs and how we can address this together. International Manufacturing X is an initiative, and as mentioned before, Catena X, Factory X, Semiconductor X are projects to implement the principles in an interoperable way for the specific vertical application. And what we want to do, and it's not a surprise because Markus has mentioned this, what we really want to do is to look resilience. It could be on the one side a supply chain. As we know, during the COVID crisis, we have several hiccups in companies. I can tell you also by myself how we handle this to make this more resilient. Can be also, but we are touching this in the afternoon more regarding skills, availability, also to have the know-how, the people together, some other aspect of resilience. Sustainability, I think I touched this before. And last but not least, competitiveness. For sure, this cooperation helps Japan, helps German companies to be more productive. And I was quite happy that today in the morning when Kaidan Ren was an article in the press exactly addressing the topic about the competitiveness and also data sharing or data transparency, and also regarding CO2 mentioned what to address. And I think internationally, and I think we are here on a very good way together. We have some kind of overall picture how we are doing this. I mentioned a little bit the attitude, the use cases, but we have somehow also to sort it out. You have here on the top level, again, the impact, what we want, great, sustainability, resilience, and competitiveness. Then, you know, we can do a lot in optimizing existing processes, but we can do much more to find new business opportunities. Could be an as a service, production machinery as a service, could be also an environment where you can use or install new applications. You see the use cases. I think I touched 2 before, but what we have to look for is for shared services. And I see here Otto-san, for example, here in the room. Since years we are working together on the OPC Foundation. We are both on the board of the OPC Foundation. You see here we are living this international collaboration since years for the reason like I mentioned before. How is then implemented? How is then realized in reality? How is again here respecting the local infrastructure and also competitive solutions. This is somehow done in their technology base level. So it could be different. You know, we have the discussion in the last years, only to make it quite clear. Use cases is somehow Confinity, Catena X, which is some kind of looking in the pre-competitive environment, what is needed, what are the standards. The operating model is, for example, in this case with Confinity X, which can be in Japan, for example, different. And last but not least, in doing this here to drive interoperability. So, sometimes, go back. Sorry for this. In a nutshell, in this international cooperation, we have 3 layers what we want to do. Exchange what we are doing, knowledge, learning from each other, knowledge transfer and learning from each other. Think about the examples which I mentioned before. To look what is the infrastructure, single out my words before, and for sure looking how we can define common standards in the interoperability to get it done, respecting the different environment, the different needs in the countries, respecting also the different verticals, and for sure giving also the company some kind of environment to have a competitive solution. How we've done this, I can make it super short because Markus has showed this slide before. We're doing this between us in deep joint projects, like you have seen before. But we're doing this, let's say, also on the international level from Americas over Europe to Asia. And I'm super proud because exactly 1 year ago, we launched this International Manufacturing X Corporation. You see this with a yellow box, a green box. We both last year at the RRI Symposium doing this and now making the next steps. You have to put it inside an overall picture. I will not touch this picture because the experts have spoken about this. And Nakashima-san, together with Klaus, are working in the background. I would only, and this is my last slides, to touch one of the elements I have shown before at the beginning, 3 use cases. But when we're going into, you see here 11 use cases, for example, which we're touching in the Manufacturing X environment in the project Factory X. You see here the information update and change services. That's what exactly the use case what I have done in detail a little bit before. You have seen the carbon footprint topic. You see here also where, let's say, a product passport, think about my example, is needed. And you have the foundation, like said before. And one topic as an example is for sure trust anchor, how we have trustness, how we are doing this, how we are handling this together. Many, many thanks, and it was a real pleasure to make the opening here. Hopefully I have given you some impression what we are doing, use cases, why we are doing this, and how we are doing this in an open, collaborative way, and really looking forward for the next steps. And yeah, I'm very optimistic that we really achieve a lot together. Many thanks, Nakashima, many thanks to all of you.
Thank you. ハン様ありがとうございました。
Dr. Hahn, thank you very much. The next speaker is from Fraunhofer ISST. We have Director of Fraunhofer ISST, Professor Boris Otto. His presentation is titled Interoperability Within and Across Data Spaces. Professor Otto will join us online remotely from Germany. Can you hear me?
I can hear you all well. Thanks for having me. Can you also hear me?
Yes, yes. So please, the stage is yours. Please start your presentation.
Let me quickly share my slides and then I will start with my presentation. So let's, first of all, thanks for having me. And also, I think it's a good opportunity to, let's say, touch upon what Tomas Hahn just said. Because when we want to address, let's say, the challenges that we are confronted with on a global scale, what we need to put into place is cross-border data sharing. And then furthermore, we would also be required to achieve interoperability within, but also across data spaces. And I would like to use the next 20 minutes or so to elaborate a little bit on this. So what I prepared is basically 3 points that I would like to discuss with you. First of all, let me come back to the business rationale, the business case even for industrial data sharing, because data sharing itself and also data spaces are not an end in itself, but they are a means to achieve certain goals. And I would like to come back to that once more in order for all of us not to forget this. Then I would briefly outline a little bit how that also informs the establishment of common European data spaces, which are, of course, designed to foster data sharing and innovation from data within Europe. But I would also like to stress that that also goes beyond Europe. And which then brings us to the third point that I would like to touch upon, which is data space interoperability. If we start with a very important industry, I'm sure both in Europe, in particular in Germany, but not less in Japan, the automotive industry, then we can identify a couple of business drivers for industrial data sharing, which are here depicted on the left-hand side. There is, let's say, the transformation towards the circular economy. And in order, let's say, to also achieve new forms of mobility, for example, electric mobility, it is a necessity that we change our current production system from sequential value chains towards a circular economy, because it's a matter of fact that otherwise we would not have, let's say, enough resources and raw materials, for example, scarce earths, and also raw material for batteries in order to fulfill the demand for electric mobility. So if we don't enter and embark into a circular use of components and materials, we will not be able to fulfill the demands that are out there, let alone, let's say, of course, requirements when it comes to recycling and also avoidance of waste. A second big use case comes along with traceability and sustainability. And I should say that there is lots of discussion about the carbon footprint of products, which is often, let's say, driven by compliance reasons. But this is not the only motivation for making sure that we are able to report on a very detailed level carbon dioxide emissions that occur in the production and distribution of systems. But in contrast, or on top of that, it's also a customer demand. OEMs, so the brand owners in the automotive value chain, require their suppliers to be very specific and give them basically, carbon footprint intervals, so to say, windows for their particular components. And that requires suppliers to be able to calculate, not only on an average basis, but on a very detailed basis, the carbon footprint of a certain component, for example, a rain sensor, which is produced in plant A, for example, in Germany, or in plant B, for example, in Turkey. So that is a requirement not only by the law, but in fact also by the customer. And of course, there are traditional use cases like quality management. Still, enormous amounts of money are spent for recalls, which do not affect the entire batch, but only a couple of, let's say, individual products. But still, we need to recall huge batches, and most of them, let's say, not necessarily. By the way, those use cases on the left-hand side are not only important for the automotive industry, but touching a little bit upon what Thomas Hahn earlier said, they are pretty common throughout or across all manufacturing industries. So we have lots of scaling potential here because, as I said, they hold true not only for automotive, but more or less for all manufacturing industries. However, in the automotive industry, we have the specific situation that we have relatively complex products that we manufacture, and of course, still a very low vertical range of manufacturer in the case of the brand owners, the original equipment manufacturers. And I say that because it's clear when you are required to, let's say, collect detailed information about not only the car itself in this case, but all the individual components, and 75% of the components basically are supplied by your network, then it's clear that you have to team up, right? So you need to engage with the entire ecosystem, with the entire value network, in order to meet the demands in terms of providing the required information to embark into a circular economy or to report on sustainability issues, for example. What we have then done, we studied a little bit, let's say, the incentives and barriers of interorganizational data sharing. And there are a couple, let's say, you can basically also categorize them in terms of technical aspects, economic aspects, and also social aspects. And there are, of course, a number of things that companies want to achieve. For example, common standards and vocabularies. Also, let's say, the ambition to overcome data silos, not only within one company, but also between companies. And of course, and the eternal goal, so to say, to have improved and seamless processes. But on the other hand, there is a fear that there will be too many standards, for example. Another incentive is also to engage in, let's say, more in-depth business collaborations, which we have just seen, for example, in the circular economy. But a barrier might also be, let's say, integrating smaller and medium-sized companies. So there is, let's say, a large field of tangents when it comes to interorganizational data sharing. And I should say that, let's say, finding this balance between the benefits and also the risks on the one hand side, and also the interest of the individual company and of a value network as a whole is, let's say, what drives also, or what has driven the development of the European data strategy. Talking about the European data strategy, I once more took, let's say, this quote here from Ursula von der Leyen when she started her first term. And also by then, it is now 4 years ago, she called for the establishment of common European data spaces, which are seen as the key or strategic instrument to foster cross-company data sharing, and in doing so, increasing the reuse of data, and in doing so, also making sure that the value of data can unfold. And I should say that in the current, you might have known that basically the election took place for the European Parliament, and we are having a new commission these days, and that the European data strategy is transformed into something which is coined the European Data Union. So it will even be, let's say, intensified in terms of making sure that data not only plays an important role as a resource in the European Union, but is more frequently shared for the better of individual companies, as I said, but also for the better of entire communities, value chains, and to a certain extent also the society. It is important to understand that the data strategy materializes in two streams mainly. On the left-hand side, we see, let's say, parts of the regulatory framework that had to be put into place. So it's basically defining the rules of the game when we talk about a fair data economy in Europe. But on the other hand, and this is what I'd like to stress right now in this talk, is, let's say, the call for interoperability. And once more, the strategic means to achieve interoperability and reuse of data is common European data spaces. Why am I qualified, so to say, to speak about the European data strategy? Well, I have the privilege, the honor, and also the pleasure, I should say, to coordinate the European Data Spaces Support Center. And in that role, I'm also, I have an observer seat in the European Data Innovation Board, which is, let's say, why I might be able to reflect also on these kind of things. So coming, let's say, closer to also the core of, let's say, today's talk, if we translate this overall strategy into fundamental or essential requirements for the European data spaces, we would come to, let's say, two major aspects. First one is trust on the left-hand side, and trust materializes basically in trust between the participants of a data space. So you need to be able to trust the guy who is requesting your data, even though you haven't known him for, let's say, decades or so. And the other thing is that you trust, on the one hand side, in the data. So is the data free of rights of third parties that I'm getting through a data space? And on the other hand, also from the perspective of the data provider, trust that the data is not misused. And that is something that we also have seen in this little study that we conducted before. People want to prevent malevolent use of data to happen. So trust is one thing. And the second major requirement is interoperability. And what I try to do is to apply, let's say, within data spaces, and you can see here the footnote number 1, the so-called European Interoperability Framework to the various aspects of data spaces. This is, in my point of view, a quite, let's say, well, instrumental tool, functional tool, because it identifies 4 layers. The first layer is the legal layer, and, well, legal aspects within the European Union have been, let's say, sorted out through the regulatory framework, as I just mentioned, for example, the Data Act and the Data Governance Act. And when we talk, in order not to anticipate too much, about, let's say, cross-data space interoperability or even cross-border data sharing, of course, we need to make sure that, let's say, also the regulatory frameworks match, which apply to the sharing of data. The second layer is then the organizational layer. And usually this is about, let's say, well, how certain processes have to be established within data spaces, what participants are allowed to do and according to which overarching rules. We have a couple of, let's say, frameworks in place, for example, from the Data Spaces Support Center, which I will touch upon later on, but also from the International Data Space Association, the so-called rule book. And I know that, let's say, there is close alignment between Japanese activities on the one hand side, and of course also European initiatives on the other hand. Then we come to, let's say, the third layer, which deals with semantic aspects of interoperability. And when we talk about data spaces, we need to make sure that interoperability on this level can be achieved with regard to the identities. So, well, we have different identity schemes in place. In Europe, we will be having very shortly EIDAS 2. If I'm not mistaken, I heard that there are similar activities going on in Japan. So we need to see whether these kind of schemas really map in order to make sure that international data sharing can be achieved. Also, we need to make sure that the claims that are connected to certain participants. So, well, my claim, for example, is that I store the data only in Europe, for example, or that I possess, let's say, a TSAC certificate, all these kind of things, that these articulation of claims is also interoperable and can be verified not only in one data space, but also in several data spaces. Then, of course, if I want to publish my data, we need to think of interoperability of the catalog schemas in order to store the metadata. We need to think of interoperability of usage and access conditions for the data, for the resulting data contracts, and of course for the shared data itself. And then while semantic aspects are related to the meaning of the data, which is usually depicted in vocabularies or, let's say, semantic information models. We also need to achieve interoperability on, let's say, even more technical aspects when it comes to, let's say, protocols and data sharing specifications. And that must happen both within, but also across data spaces. I then also did the exercise to go through what happens really on two sides of a data sharing transaction, which is on the one hand side, the data rights holder, and on the other hand, the data user. I don't want to go through all the details, but just touch upon a couple of things, which basically depict the fundamental requirements when it comes to data sharing agreements. For example, the data rights holder must be free to grant rights or not. They must be able to publish their metadata and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, as mentioned earlier, the data user must be able to trust that the legal status of the data access, shared, and reused is clear. And also, let's say that the data provider really has a license to act on behalf of the data rights holder and so forth, and so on and so forth. This is also not only just a theoretical concept, but has been implemented, for example, in Catena X. And I should say that Catena X is not a project anymore. It's there, it's live. Companies use it for, let's say, business critical operations. So use cases are implemented with Catena X. And if they would be broken, then basically production would stop. So Catena X is at the heart of the automotive industry. It's live. And you can see here interoperability also depicted in the so-called governance model, which identifies so-called flight levels, which are pretty close to the the interoperability framework that I just introduced before. So we have this 30,000 feet view for, let's say, the overall governance framework, which also includes, let's say, regulatory aspects. And then it goes down to the specific data sharing layer. I talked about the blueprint for data spaces, which is elaborated and developed by the European Data Spaces Support Center. It's basically, well, a template that can be used for the creation and development of data spaces. It includes both technical building blocks, but also organizational and business building blocks. And I just came back, and that is also the reason why I unfortunately can't be with you in face-to-face and presence. I just came back from one of the general meetings of the Data Spaces Support Center that we had in Belgium. And we stressed the fact of cross-data space interoperability. So the next version of the blueprint will also have a dedicated section for cross-data space interoperability. Yes, I should come to a couple of, let's say, very concrete activities that I want to make sure that you are aware of. There is an initiative in Europe under the umbrella of the CEN. So CEN stands for Centre Européen de Normalisation, which is basically the European Standardization Agency, where we define the fundamental requirements for a trusted data transaction as they are used, for example, in data spaces. And this is also what I referred to when I talked about semantic interoperability. You can see on the left-hand side these, let's say, couple of, let's say, life cycle stages of a data transaction between a data provider and a data user. And we need to make sure that interoperability can be achieved for all of the 6 life cycles. I think they are not very specific. They hold true not only for Europe, of course, but are very generic. So that's also the reason why I presented here. And when we, let's say, talk about, let's say, closer collaboration within the international manufacturing X environment, but also, let's say, when we talk about how to achieve, let's say, data sharing between Uranus, Catena, and other data spaces, for example, we need to address, let's say, these 6 life cycle stages at least. Yes, let me also make you aware of some very important things when it comes to achieving standards for interoperability. So there is a lots of activities going on the specification side. For example, the IDSA Association published earlier this year the data space protocol in the first stable version. This has been taken up by the open source community under the Eclipse Foundation, and there are a lot of, let's say, members which represent individual companies, but also entire ecosystems, which basically join forces in order to develop, let's say, the software. And further on, we have then the opportunity, due to the fact that the Eclipse Foundation has a category A liaison with ISO, to bring that relatively quickly to an ISO standard. And we are currently working on the first standard of a standards family, which is AWI 2151, which lays the fundamentals for data space characteristics. And this will be then followed up by the next standard in that family that basically makes the data space protocol an international standard. And I think this is something, and Tomas said that earlier on, where we all have to work together, because the challenges that we are confronted with are ones that can't be solved in Europe or Japan only, but that require a collaboration on a global scale. Yes, perhaps a couple of, let's say, final thoughts about different ways to achieve inter-data space interoperability. So I think we can, in general, identify 3 patterns. So we could, on the left-hand side, leave it a little bit to the individual participants, if you may. So assuming, let's say, these icons here depict 2 data spaces, and you have a couple of, let's say, participants in each of those. You can basically, just leave it, as I said, up to the participants to walk through these 4 layers, legal, org, semantic, technical, to sort it out by themselves. This is probably not the, let's say, the best and the most, let's say, smooth way, but there may be options where this is suitable. Then we have, let's say, overlapping data spaces where the interoperability task, I should say, could be done by intermediaries. So service providers like, for example, Cofinity X in the case of Catena, but also others, Fujitsu, for example, with whom we collaborate on this matters in order to make sure that, let's say, the interoperability task is, let's say, done by one for all. And we could also imagine a third pattern where we do not necessarily have 2 separated data spaces, but rather something which is nested. And I should say that this model is closest to the original definition of a data space, which basically did not know, let's say, a definite boundary of a data space. So assuming that we have, let's say, a higher order data space, which defines, for example, the organizational interoperability framework and also the legal framework, and gives specifications also on the semantic level, this could just be, let's say, inherited by smaller sub-data spaces in this overarching data space. I'm not so sure whether that fits basically, let's say, in our case, but at least that is something which is very closely related to this idea of common European data spaces, because we have in Europe a number of, let's say, individual data space activities in one domain, for example, mobility, and they eventually need to form altogether an overarching European mobility data space. I also know that there are discussions around, how many Catenas should there be? Since I'm also in the board of directors of Catena X, I believe the best way is that there is only one Catena, but there will probably be more, let's say, individual instantiations when it comes to certain services, which then all follow, let's say, the overarching Catena rules, if you may. So this is, I think, something that will also be touched upon in International Manufacturing X. And I think Tomas said that, Tomas, you said you were very proud that this is now in place. And I can say I would like to support this, because this is really, really a great opportunity for all of us, because we have a platform, a collaboration format where we can drive these things further. And I can say that I'm very glad and very happy to be part of this initiative. And I'm looking very much forward to the next steps in, let's say, collaborating with all of you. And I hope you, you received a couple of, let's say, fresh ideas through my presentation. And I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. オット先生、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Otto-san. Dr. Otto will be coming to the panel discussion. Next, allow me to introduce the next speaker. It is the co-chairperson, Working Group RRI and Senior Strategist and Control System Platform Division of Hitachi Limited, Mr. Naohiko Irie. His title of presentation is Industrial Data Space Use Case Study in RRI. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I am Irie Naohiko, Working Group 1 Co-Chair and Senior Strategist, Control System Platform Division, Hitachi Limited. Last year at RRI, we have had a use case study of industrial data space, which I would like to share with you on this occasion. We will also be exploring the international trends and directions that we should be heading forward. First, this is the organization of RRI. I will be just skipping the top half of the slide, but please pay attention to the bottom of this slide. There are 3 working groups at RRI, and Working Group 1 is the Manufacturing Business Revolution through IoT Working Group, under which there are 4 action groups. And Action Group 4 is on the Industrial Data Collaboration for Engineering Transformation, led by Professor Kondo of the University of Tokyo. Under Action Group 4, there are 4 task forces. The first task force, as has been discussed in detail by previous speakers, are survey and evaluation of Catena X trends and other initiatives. And this task force also organized webinars to promote the penetration of this Catena X and other trends at Japan as well. And we are on Task Force 2, consideration of use cases for industrial data space. Task Force 3 is about the future technology study for engineering transformation, and Task 4 is the one that is being launched this year. And TTCom's Mr. Sakaino lead this task force to promote the communication with domestic and international organizations. And use cases have been explored at Task Force 2, which I now would like to discuss. Before doing that, allow me to introduce the members that joined the discussion. Use case from the user company perspective, there are several participants. And there were also participants as a platform builder. We also do have persons with consulting perspective and digital X, Green X Digital Consortium. So altogether, 24 people joined this task force. Last year's International Symposium also touched upon this framework. Data space. We first discussed the common goal of this framework. And in trying to explore the common goal, we then also looked into the concerns that may arise by the use of such framework. We assessed these negative impact of the use of such framework before deciding on the common goal. So at the step 1, we first discussed the common goal of the framework. Then through the discussion, we have concluded that 2 major goals, one being setting common goals for industrial data collaboration to solve social issues. Having said that, because they're corporate stakeholders, it also needs to have certain business incentives to do so. And we extracted 5 elements of incentives, one being the circular economy, decarbonization, safety and security, and international collaboration, and society gentle to the people. These are the 5 areas of incentives. Productivity improvement and cost cutting can also be another aspect of incentives, and competitiveness of the products and its improvement, and also corporate value increase, followed by the corporate social responsibility, and 5th, new market creation. So solving social issues and increasing corporate value can be pursued concurrently or may be mutually conflicting. However, the key here is to make it compatible. Not only driving these 2 goals within a company, we also have to drive the incentives of end users, shareholders, industry, country, and international communities. And that was the gist of the discussion that we have had. And as a second step, we then also assess the concerns from a user perspective. There are 4 points of concern in total. At the center is the data space that needs to be managed and operated. Data holders and data providers' concerns have their own concerns, and there are concerns on the part of the users of such data. So there are different types of concerns depending on the position in this flowchart. Rulemaking or standardizations, authentication or tools, all these needs to be looked into, trying to minimize the concerns that may arise from the use of such framework. Use case scenarios have also been assessed. On the left is the list of scenarios submitted by the 24 members. In total, we have had 16 use case scenarios. As you can see, there are certain overlaps between different scenarios. That is why we grouped these scenarios into 4 groupings. On the right, you can see a matrix horizontally. This is quite similar to the first layer of IMX. Sustainability, resilience, and innovation are the horizontal axis. So this is more like a neutralization of negative impacts. And IMX, competitiveness, and innovation is something that we can seek to achieve after neutralizing the negative impact. And vertically, you can see the types of data that needs to be shared. Some of the data will be linked to the products that needs to be shared. Other types of data may also be related to corporate activities that needs to be circulated and shared. So that is the quadrants matrix over which we have laid out 4 groupings of use case scenarios. This is such a busy slide. And the summary is the 16 scenarios. Vertically, you can see 4 different groupings of the use case scenarios, as well as the overview of each scenario, and the values that each scenario seeks to achieve, be it social or environmental value, or corporate value even. And then we identify the stakeholders who can drive these values. And we also clarified the data or information that needs to be shared to achieve each goal. I do not have go into the detail of this table, so just let me share with you part of the table.
First, starting with use case number 1. This is ESG indicators relating to products that are used to identify this use case. There are multiple supply chain players, for example, CO2 emission, carbon footprint. Take that as an example, and eventually, product manufacturer will disclose this information to users, possibly to investors, as well as regulatory authorities. So this is the use case of disclosure of that information. By doing so, we'll be able to strive to achieve decarbonization society, and companies will be able to maintain the product competitiveness at the same time. Second example has to do with quality of product. It's the traceability scenario. Products are increasingly complex today, and there is a lot of relevant engineering information to be shared. The challenge today is product-related cyber attack that has become a major challenge. Vulnerability, a software bomb, that sort of information is to be shared. By doing so, eventually, very important airplane, social infrastructure related products, we will be able to clearly identify vulnerabilities and manage them, and will be better deal with a possible incident when it breaks out. So safety, security, and resiliency would be the value that can be generated in both corporate as well as society sector. Thirdly, that is the resource sharing between companies. Companies, especially manufacturers, when they produce product, they have to consume resources. In this example, this has to do with logistics as well as energy consumption. Especially the question today is how you can procure green energies. How much energy is needed, how much you can share, that information can be transacted in data space. Companies may be able to increase its resilience and possibly reduce cost as well. This is the fourth example. This is about the circular economy. Of course, this has to do with sustainability. This is more about creating a new market. So it's not just limited to manufacturers. Arterial downstream companies can participate in this new economic zone. And there is diverse information necessary. What are the components that are used in the product? How you can decompose, how the products are used. That information has to be passed on from upstream players, eventually down to the players that recycle, reuse the products after use. By doing so, we'll be able to achieve circular economy and make new markets. So I've talked about 4 use cases, 4 examples here. But looking back, is it really possible? That's the fundamental question that you might ask, especially if you look at the first use case, that is ESG information sharing. Badly passport, DPP, could be good examples in this case. What we have to do will be identified, and we give a structure to that. Of course, these are relevant to data spaces. We have to look at participating companies. They need to provide functions, and we have to have trusted platform to support the companies. So there are 3 perspectives here. And we have summarized our challenges from these 3 perspectives. In relation to data space, we have to have international rules, we have to have international standards, and we have to have international connectivity and interoperability. And in terms of operation, each space will be operated independently, but we have to be able to federate them. And data model for transaction and sharing need to be developed. And going to the right, in the eyes of user companies, there are many things that they have to consider. They have in-house data. How can they organize internal data? I think this is a very serious problem to Japanese companies. So when data is to be disclosed, you have to have standardization. You have to make sure data is highly reliable. So it's the issue of data management. And they have to change the mindset before they are ready to participate in data spaces. And going down to bottom left, in order to participate in data space, trust will become indispensable. Would companies be allowed to data space? How can they prepare themselves to be able to participate in data space? And of course, a trust should be part of that foundation. So these are some of the challenges we have been able to identify. And this is the result of our discussion last year. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have a report. In August, we issued this report. In relation to this, from the very beginning, METI has been involved in this process. And this May, we publicized the manufacturing white paper issued by METI. And they actually referred to this report. The common goals and use cases were actually referred to in METI's official report. Internally, domestically, battery passport will be the target. We have a new ecosystem, Uranos, that has been just launched. How we are going to deal with this internationally, how we can expand and increase use cases, I think that management has to be coordinated. And that discussion will be done within Keidanren. There will be a new committee started. And we, RRI members, myself and Sakaino-san, will participate in the committee. And we came up with this proposal. And October 15th, we are going to disclose this proposal document. As I said earlier, the topics that I discussed today are included in this proposal document. Industrial data space establishment. And along with that, we have to have trusted foundation, trusted platform in Japan are both important. And as Dr. Hahn, Professor Otto said, international interoperability is a critical issue. How we can promote this in private and public sector. How can we involve user companies? How can we make sure use cases that are engaging enough to private companies? So these are the challenges that we all discussed together. And as a result, we came up with this proposal paper. And this will be the basis for us to be able to build frameworks going forward. Now, this is my last slide. All of you who are here today, and especially those coming all the way from Germany, we would like to achieve international cooperation and how we can use that framework to achieve higher value. That's what I want to discuss with all of you today. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それでは引き
Thank you very much, Mr. Irie. Now we'd like to begin the panel discussion. Professor Otto is joining us on remote online, and the panel is participated by Irie-san as well as Mr. Schneider. Thank you very much. Please come forward and join us, Dr. Schneider. Now, we have time until 1 o'clock, so why don't we start the panel discussion. Now, in advance to the panel today, we have prepared some materials, documents, and have already prepared some questions for the panel members. Also, we have received some questions from the participants. So we'd like to try to mix them together as we proceed. Now, moving on to the next slide. Rather, before we start, first of all, I have to introduce to you our panel members. From Fraunhofer ISST, we have Professor Otto with us. Thank you very much for joining. Also from Hitachi, WG1 co-chairperson, we have Dr. Irie. Also, we have a new member for the panel. We have Dr. Sebastian Schneider from DMG Mori. Later on, I'll ask him to introduce himself, and I'll be moderating. I'm Nakashima, RRI. Thank you very much. Now, first, Dr. Schneider, can you please very briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Sebastian Schneider. I'm since 15 years at DMG Mori in Germany, and therefore responsible for the R&D projects. And one very important project is Manufacturing X or Factory X, and I'm responsible for this project.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to the panel discussion. We have 5 major topics to discuss in this panel, especially during session 1, we are discussing German and European activities. Therefore, number 1 and 2 on the slide is more for European or German activities. We would like to understand what is happening in more detail. The third question is about the situation in Japan. The fourth point being that not just Japan, Germany, but global activities. What should be our take? And lastly, we'll have a conclusion. So why don't I move on to the first question? And I would like to follow this in order. Now, Catena X. And this question goes to Dr. Schneider. And Catena X. In Catena X, automotive OEM showed strong leadership. And there is a typo in Japanese. It says strong, powerful leadership is a driving force. But what about the situation in Factory X? Are there any very strong drivers or leadership companies, or is it moving ahead in another format? That would be my first question to you, Dr. Schneider.
We have 46 companies involved. There are the 2 main important software companies, Siemens and SAP. Then we have 2 machine tool builders, Trumpf and DMG Mori. And we have a lot of, let's say, other participants like suppliers of us. EFM is a sensor specialist, Festo, for example, and others. And also we have then some smaller software companies and also some research companies involved. And maybe to add, so all of them have not only one role, but maybe further roles. So some of them have also the role as a let's say, company or factory operator. So, for example, Siemens has also some machines from us, and there we can also implement our new products.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. So, for the entire industry, the concept of manufacturing is changing, and that's what Factory X is working on. That's my understanding of what it is. Another question to Dr. Schneider. Earlier, in the Hahn slide, he talked about use case for Factory X, and there are 11 use cases that he had presented. And you can, perhaps rather than working on all 11 simultaneously, maybe there are some more important use cases, priorities. Which ones of all of the 11 are the important or high priority use cases? That's the first question in my second part of the question. And as you engage, as you prioritize those use cases, how will manufacturing practices change in the future? Those are my questions.
We have these 11 use cases. We have also the categories, and I like the idea that also you showed before. There's also the categories in Japan, that they are quite similar to that, and maybe to do it in or to use these categories. So first topic, and I think that was also the topic which Tomas and also Dr. Irie showed, the topic of sustainability and energy management. So of course we have the topic of product carbon footprint. That's also relevant for us. But the other way around, we as a machine tool builder have also the responsibility regarding energy management. So the energy taking some measures to reduce the energy consumption of the machine tools. And there we have also possibilities with data exchange to reduce the energy consumption. And so this is also quite important. And I think you asked how this will change the manufacturing process. So with exchanging data, it's possible to reduce maybe also some energy consumption and also to adapt. You showed before this, let's say, the resources and the adoption of the resources. There you can also adapt then the energy consumption, for example, and this is also possible with data exchange. So that's maybe one topic. Second very important topic is a topic regarding competitiveness of our companies, of our customers. So when we want to improve our machines must run more hours during the year. And therefore, it's necessary that we have an autonomous operation as a service. And so that's one of the use cases which is very crucial for us to provide measures how to, let's say, make the machines run more hours a year, and that our customers can, let's say, produce more and earn more money with it. That's second topic. Then third topic, also what you showed before a little bit, like traceability, is also very important. Actually, a lot of our customers are in aerospace, and we are also involved in Aerospace X because there we can also then, let's say, develop the use cases for them. And one very important topic in aerospace is the topic of traceability. So in Catena X, there's always the example traceability of the parts, and if you have then a wrong part, then how to get all the affected cars. And also in aerospace, same topic. So if there is any error, how to make sure what was the reason for it and how was the process conditions. And therefore, traceability is a very critical part and or very critical topic. And that's also one of the, let's say, use cases which is very, very relevant for us. Further topic is then maybe also condition monitoring-led service. That's also from, let's say, the amount of money and also participants involved. One of the biggest use cases, because at the moment it's like this, that we can, of course, have the overview on the machine, how is the status of any kind of machine. But with data exchange, we can improve the service much more, and we can then also sell the customer much more new service models to increase the availability of the machine.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. We have received a couple of questions from the venue participants about a factory use case, which I would now like to ask the participants. I think that it was related to the use case presented by Dr. Hahn, DPPs within the 11 use cases. When exploring use cases, before deciding on an appropriate approach, I assume that it is a process that is shared across the industry. But do you have any specific guidelines or documentation to guide the information sharing across the industry?
At the moment, we don't have the guideline. We are developing it right now regarding the data exchange. So that's at the moment in development. But of course, at the end, there will be some guideline coming out of that.
多分、DPP を
DPP implementation or the mechanism of DPP will be used, and exactly how it is to be used is something that Japanese counterparts are also highly interested in. So it will be wonderful if we can share that process of formulation of guideline as well. Now, let's move on to the next question. So we now have touched upon the use cases. In exploring use cases, I believe that data spaces needs to be joined by a large number of companies, meaning that companies must be interested in and incentivized to join the data space. How can we drive the wider support base of corporate participants? What initiatives are being driven in Europe? What efforts are being made? I would like to ask Sebastian, and also I would also like to ask Dr. Otto as well.
So within the project Factory X, we call it customer sound sports. So that's the possibility that we show all our customers how is the actual status, how are the use cases, and what could be the benefit for them. And that's what we show them within these customer soundboards. And then, of course, later on, there is also the possibility that they can participate then within the project, let's say, as application companies. So this is the first step of integration of customers. Second step of integration, I think you saw it in the slides at the beginning from Hahn-san. There was this, let's say, the transfer and scale MX. So we are starting a big project called Scale MX, which is focusing on the transfer to SMEs, and then that's the next step to how to transfer all the new products, all the new ideas in the, let's say, in all the companies, in all the SMEs.
はい、ありがとうございます。Otto 先生いかがでしょうか。
Dr. Otto, on question number 3, do you have any interventions?
Yeah, that's of course a very important question that is also very close to my heart. Let me give three points, or let me answer with 3 points to this question. First of all, we are talking about ecosystems, and in ecosystems we need to acknowledge the fact that network effects apply. That means the more participants we have for a data space and a data ecosystem, the greater is the value for all the individual participants. So therefore we must have an interest to scale as much as possible. Second thing, in order to reach that, what we need to do is to lower the entry barriers for every individual participant as much as we can. And that is also something that we have learned in Catena X to, as I said, make the onboarding process as quick as possible and as easy as possible. So it should be no burden for a company to join a data space. And also, we must, let's say, offer directly from joining first value, business value for the participants. And that is something which I believe will come, for example, through very basic data services, for example, around master data, but also I think around things that everybody needs to address, for example, DPP. The third aspect that I would like to stress to this question goes back to what Irie-san also said, which is the internal readiness of companies. So the internal data management capability of the organizations, of the companies, must improve in order to be ready to be connected to a data space. To be honest, I think this is the biggest challenge. Because I have been, let's say, working on this field for 25 years. We made great progress, I should say, but there is still many things to be done, I must say. So 3 things: network effects on ecosystem level, direct business benefit, low entry barriers for every single participant, and number 3, increasing maturity of internal data management capabilities.
はい、ありがとうございます。非常に本質
Thank you very much. That is a very substantive, important points. Next slide, please. Here, we'd like to discuss the readiness, challenges and solutions of companies in Europe. We also have received some questions related to readiness. Let's go to question number 3. On the top half of the slide, Japanese companies do not seem to be as ready as their European companies to invest in industrial data exchange. For companies to promote sharing, how can we drive wider participation? What are the motivations on the part of European companies to join this movement? This question is again to the 2 speakers who have answered to the previous questions. Can you give us any hints?
So of course, so maybe the first thing is, I think the lessons learned from the previous projects was that before we always developed the solutions for ourselves, and now that's the answer in Factory X and Manufacturing X. We need, let's say, a strong collaboration of all companies. So as Tomas mentioned before, we cannot do that by ourselves, and I think that's one of the most important things and lessons learned. And I think that's mostly the most important thing. And then maybe also what we also need to do, I think we need easy solutions at the beginning. You see that also in Catena X. I think the easy solutions which all of the users are, all of the companies are using, that's what we should start with, and then we can maybe also integrate them later on more complex solutions.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Dr. Otto?
Yeah, I think there are 2 major drivers. And once more, it's not an end in itself. So we do not engage in data sharing because we have nothing else to do. But it's, let's say, something that helps companies to, let's say, increase their competitive position, right? So be more competitive and also sustain their competitive advantage. As Sebastian also said, in many cases, companies realize that it's better to team up with others because, for example, also again in Catena, they realized that it was just too expensive if everybody would try to implement a data sharing platform by themselves. And they would never have, let's say, achieved the adoption in the value chain that would have been needed to be successful. So sharing a burden together addressing a challenge is one of the key drivers. The other fundamental driver is innovation. For example, there is a very interesting ecosystem called GDSO. It's basically around the tire industry. So basically, well, tires for cars and let's say large excavators and so on and so forth. Where also European, but also many Japanese companies are involved. And they teamed up in order to, well, seize the innovation potential that comes out of, let's say, sharing data across the entire life cycle of a tire, right? So innovation is a key driver for teaming up in data ecosystems. Of course, it's always easier to start with the cost side, but I think the biggest potential is as we go, then more towards, let's say, innovative business scenarios. And we touched upon another very important one, which is circular economy. And I personally think that this is, let's say, a direction that in particular European, but I guess also Japanese should go, because, well, that's a huge innovation potential for us to seize.
はい、ありがとうございます。ここの、スライド。
Thank you very much. On this slide, there is one more question. The lower half of the slide has a question on data space. We tend to talk about the system when we talk about data space. As has been pointed out today, the perspective of users using companies, are they ready to use and participate in data space? That is a major challenge. For example, in Europe, Catena X has already started now using companies, user companies. Were they ready? It's very hard to express to what extent companies were ready, because there are many companies, including SMEs. Were they prepared enough to be able to use data spaces fully, or do they have to work on that more to be able to use fully the data spaces? So this question is also to Sebastian as well as Dr. Otto, please.
So first thing was, I think the answer was already in the question before. The question, let's say, that we analyzed and said that we can only make it together. Second topic is, I addressed it a little bit before, let's say the kind of use cases. So we had a lot of applications before as digital products, which were, let's say, not so directly related to machine tools and the manufacturing process. And that's why we had a lot of effort for creating this kind of solutions, but the benefit was not that high. And I think that's also something, that's what I mentioned before, when we need use cases which a lot of customers can easily need and can easily use, and I think which are more related to the manufacturing process itself. So that's why I said condition monitoring-led services. We have a lot of machines with a lot of sensors inside which we can use, and that's why we, for example, use this as an example or use this as a use case to take their benefit for our customers.
ありがとうございます。オット先生いかがでしょう。
Thank you. Dr. Otto, please.
Yeah, I think it is what we also discussed earlier, very important that companies, let's say, continue to improve their data management capability in the company. So if we talk about that data is a strategic resource, then we also manage data as such. And once more, we have, let's say, improved a lot over the last 20, 25 years, but I think there is still room for improvement. To give you a very concrete example, I think one of the key capabilities within a company is a comprehensive data catalog, which basically is an inventory of all the data resources that I have in a company, which comprises, let's say, technical aspects like, okay, where's the data source and through which API is it accessible and so on and so forth. It also has, let's say, a business aspect. Well, who's responsible? Who's the business owner for this kind of data sources? And of course, a legal aspect. Under which conditions am I allowed to share this data with whom? And so on and so forth. And this capability needs to be established in all companies in order to be ready to efficiently participate in a data space. If I don't have that, I will have no fun in participating in data ecosystems. So this is really critical. A last point on this. This is not only something that comes along with data spaces. Data spaces and data ecosystems are just a trigger to improve. As we learned from Sebastian Schneider and also Thomas Hahn and others, because there are so many challenges that a company has to address and so many opportunities to seize, which simply require, let's say, the further development and maturing of the data management capability. So you have to do it anyway. So, but yeah, let's say, pay attention to that and make yourself ready, shortly do the homework, so to say, in order to be a part of a data ecosystem.
ありがとうございます。そうすると、
Thank you very much. So those are the requirements. Needs are widely recognized in Europe, I believe. So have you already achieved high level of that recognition? Do you think many companies in Europe, do they have to do more to achieve that level required? Dr. Otto, please.
Yes, a couple of years ago, we conducted a survey among the German companies. And this survey was thankfully supported by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs. And that showed that on a maturity model, which consists of maturity levels from 0, which is the lowest level, to 5, which is the highest level, that 80%, 80, assessed themselves on the 2 lowest levels. And that was, of course, eye-opening. I think this has to be put into context. This study was conducted 4 years ago or even 5, so the situation has improved. And in this 80%, the majority of the companies were really small and micro companies. However, those are important because in our value chains, if I go to the second or third tier of the value chain, I very quickly end up with very small companies who, for example, do a certain, metal sheet processing for, I don't know, a car engine or something. So we need to address these small companies and make them ready. That must be one of the paramount actions in order to make data ecosystems successful. And what Sebastian Schneider said, the scaling initiative in Manufacturing X will support that very much. We also have, other, initiatives already established, like Transfer X, for example, which basically educates and supports individual companies in increasing their readiness. But this must be our top priority, and I'm sure that the situation in other, highly developed economies is similar, as I just referred to as in Germany. But this is something that we need to do. And perhaps a last comment, this is also an opportunity, because if we play it right, then data ecosystem could just, offer some sort of outsourcing opportunity for small companies for their data management. So they can just do their data management, in fact, in the end, through a data ecosystem and not have to care about it on their own, I think. And because that is a big opportunity, because if we go from one to the next and try to do the integration, that will just take too long. I think we need to offer new cool data management services to reach, to create the broad adoption and reach out to all these micro companies that are out there. Yeah.
はい、ありがとうございます。とってもよく状況が分かりました。
Thank you very much. We very well understand the situation in Germany. Let's move on to the next question. This is about Japan. So I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Irie. We have Uranus system started. So maybe you can give us the current overview of what is taking place in Japan, the awareness of companies, what are the areas that need attention. And you talked about proposal documents prepared by Keidanren. So what are some of the expected initiatives coming up in Japan? So first, to talk about the internal situation, it's not that I understand everything. Uranus ecosystem, it's very hard for me to personally talk about this system. As I said in my presentation, it is similar to the battery passport amongst automotive industries. They are working on this new project. So this is one use case emerging. How can we expand this to international cooperation? How can we increase the number of use cases? That I think is the major challenges that we have in Japan today. Having said that, in Europe, especially in Germany, the initiatives taken there are very widely spreading. The rules has been made, standardization is progressing, platform has been laid. But internally, in Japan, although this is my personal observation, we have to have clear-cut use cases first to encourage companies to start moving toward data exchange. So what are some of the use cases that we can make in Japan? We have to involve relevant ministries and Keidanren and specific companies. So we have to have sort of consensus as to how we can proceed within Japan. So in that sense, this proposal coming from Keidanren this week is a good opportunity.
And in Keidanren's proposal, more than 10 companies have participated and in us putting together the proposal. So as we discuss the proposal, what are the possible use cases, what are the challenges, those are the discussion taking place already. We would like to use this discussion and argument as a basis for us to move towards international collaboration and other expanded activities. Thank you very much. Now we are running out of time, so why don't we move ahead? The fourth point in question. So far we've talked about Japan and Germany, but we would like to move towards global collaboration as well. Now, this is the question to Dr. Schneider and Professor Otto once again for your views. Now, about International Manufacturing X, or called IMX, at least that's what it says on the slide, for a global manufacturing data space expansion and to ensure interoperability, efforts have begun. That's how I understand IMX. Now, at the same time, for different regions, business practices, corporate readiness, we've already talked about readiness, or the concept of data space may vary depending on the regions or the areas in the world. So in the future, global interoperability achievement, what should be the perspectives we should have in terms of variabilities as we move towards this way? I would like to have your view on this.
The study from Keidanren was very good, and when you see that the use cases, they are quite similar, as Dr. Irie already mentioned, so they are quite similar also to our use cases. And of course, there are then maybe dependent on the region and dependent on the, let's say, on the branches, maybe some variances of the use cases, but the general idea is quite similar. And what we also do is that within International Manufacturing X, we are looking that we, let's say, get an overview about all the different projects and activities going on worldwide and to coordinate them a little bit, to adjust the different views and to see if when there are, for example, when there is one activity going on with product carbon footprint, to adjust the different activities, first of all in Germany, and then later on maybe also worldwide, that we have then a common understanding of how product carbon footprint should look like, or any kind of other topic.
ありがとうございます。オット先生いかがでしょうか。
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Otto.
Yeah, I think as mentioned, many of, let's say, the use cases are global ones, so we need to address them together. And what I always find helpful is to, let's say, structure the task into, let's say, different layers. which is also why I mentioned earlier on this interoperability framework, which identifies 4 different layers, like the legal layer, the organizational one, the semantic one, and technical one. And I think we have, let's say, lots of experiences in working together on technical and semantic standardization. Be it, for example, for very generic, let's say, aspects on ISO level, but also on W3C level. But also, let's say, industry standardization. OPC was mentioned earlier on, which we can basically rely on and draw from. But of course, there will be other things that we need to, map somehow or analyze first, let's say, compatibility. I think, in particular, when it comes to the legal frameworks, like always, according to the Pareto law, there will be 80% which somehow match and others that don't. And then we need to basically make sure how to achieve interoperability also on these grounds. But I'm sure that this will be possible because, once more, we share the same challenges. And therefore, I think data sharing on a cross-border basis is of interest for all, players in the field. And these kind of, let's say, interoperability frameworks would allow us to structure the task and to cut, let's say, the task into manageable pieces. And that is something which I like. And I think we have also made, let's say, in the collaboration between Japan and Europe, great progress over the last 10 years and achieved a lot. So I'm convinced that we will also be able to address this issue.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。もう一つ。
Thank you very much. One more question, and this goes to Dr. Irie. This is question 2. RRI is also participating in IMX. What are the views you have in terms of establishing the global interoperability? Well, IMX, we have been invited and we are participating as RRI, but not just RRI, but there are various other organizations, including government agencies, that we collaborate with as we engage with IMX. Now, one thing. Right now in Japan, data space is being structured, and how are we going to make this interoperable globally? That's really an important discussion point. As Dr. Otto showed us his slide earlier, various integration levels to nested format, the data space variability should be recognized, and with the recognition, we need to ensure interoperability. That is the type of discussion that is truly needed, and that's the perspective or the view we have as we participate in IMX. Another point, as Sebastian said, globally, common use case needs to be set up. That will be important. For example, carbon footprint or the DPP that Europe is leading right now. Global collaboration is truly needed in order for that to be successful. Now, for common use case consensus achievement, each individual players will have to work for each individual regions organization, and I have a lot of expectation in IMX to make this move forward. Thank you very much. We are running out of time. We have received many questions, but we will not have time to answer all the questions. But in one way or the other, to all the questions that we have received, we would like to be able to receive comments from the panel members and would like to share their answers in the end. Lastly, the last question. The audience we have today who are here on the floor, or those of you who are joining us online, quite a large number of those participants are from machine industries or manufacturing industries. Now, the panel members, to those audience, the industry data collaboration. For that perspective, what are the actions you would like to invite the participants to take? This is a question to all three of you. First, Dr. Schneider, could you please respond? What actions do you call appeal to your audience?
Participate in the activities we saw before, and then maybe also define your own benefits, your own use cases, and then integrate it in your daily business.
ありがとうございます。じゃあ、次。
Thank you. Then Dr. Otto, please.
Yeah, I like this question very much because I think we should embrace more the logic of the software industry, of the platform and the app economy. We must understand the fundamental logic, how this works, in order to be successful, well, in this field. And if I may, sometimes I still have the impression that software and data is still considered, let's say, you know, the black sheep, not sure whether that exists in Japanese as well, of, let's say, well, the little sister of mechanical and electrical engineering, and this must change. So we need to embrace, let's say, the value creation potential of software and data in its full right, and not just as a side product of mechanical and electrical engineering.
ありがとうございます。では最後、入江さんの方から一言をね。
Dr. Irie, please.
なかなかその
Situation at home needs to be driven. So those stakeholders in the manufacturing industry, please do not consider this as a risk factor or a cost center. Please try to use it as much as possible for your benefit. Within RRI, we also have this discussion. At the nascent phase of Internet, we had a similar situation. After the rise of the Internet, business convenience has exponentially expanded. So data space needs to be globally shared to create wider set of opportunities for everyone. So that should be the source of aspirations to drive this initiative. And that is why I want to ask for your wider participation. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So it was a very short session of 2 hours, but it was full of action and information. And this concludes the panel discussion. Dr. Otto, Dr. Schneider, and Dr. Irie, thank you very much for your contributions. This concludes Session 1. A warm round of applause is in order for the discussants. My special thanks also goes to everyone who attended both in person and online. I will now inform you of the schedule for the rest of the session. We'll be having a 1-hour lunch break. From 2 p.m., we'll be starting the Session 2. In Session 2, we will introduce case studies of common issues in Japan, Germany, Europe, and the United States. We will share with you all those analytical cases and discuss issues in digital policies and issues that need to be resolved through international collaboration. So I hope you will come back